They called me the daughter every Amish family wished they had. And for years, I believed that if I just kept smiling, kept working, kept being everything they needed me to be, nobody would ever have to know what I was carrying inside. But secrets have a weight to them. And the longer you carry one alone, the heavier it gets, until one day it stops feeling like protection and starts feeling like a prison. What I hid for years changed the way I saw myself long before it ever changed the way anyone else saw me, and by the time the truth finally came out, I realized that the perfect girl they had all been praising was never really me at all. I grew up in a small, tightly woven Amish community in rural Pennsylvania, the kind of place where everyone knows your name, your family, and your family's family going back 3 generations. My father was a quiet, steady man who worked the land with his hands and never wasted a single word unless it carried meaning. My mother was the kind of woman who could hold an entire household together with nothing but discipline, faith, and a deep, unspoken love that she showed through action rather than words. I was the oldest of 6 children, and from the time I was old enough to understand what that meant, I understood what it required of me. I was supposed to set the example. I was supposed to be the steady one, the reliable one, the one who made things easier for everyone else around me. And I tried. I genuinely tried. I loved my family with everything I had. I loved the way our community gathered on Sunday mornings, the way the women moved around each other in a kitchen like a quiet, perfectly timed dance, the way the fields looked in the early hours before the sun had fully risen. I loved the simplicity of it. I wanted to belong to it completely, and so I made myself into exactly what everyone expected. I woke up early, I worked hard, I smiled when I was tired, I served when I was struggling, and I never, not once, let anyone see that anything was wrong. By the time I was 17, people in our community spoke about me in a way that should have made me proud. The bishop's wife once told my mother that I had the spirit of a true servant, and my mother's face lit up in a way I had never seen before. Our neighbors would say things like, "Your Hannah is something special. She is going to make a wonderful wife someday. She has a gift for bringing peace to every room she walks into." The young women my age looked up to me, and the older women treated me like proof that their way of raising children was right and good. I was the example. I was the standard. And every single word of praise they gave me felt like another stone being placed on top of what I was really feeling underneath. Because here is what nobody knew. I had a dream. Not a dream like a passing wish, but a deep, consuming, almost painful longing that I had been carrying since I was 12 years old. I wanted to learn. I wanted to read beyond the books I was allowed to read, to understand the world beyond the boundaries of our community, to ask questions that nobody around me was asking. I had found a small collection of books hidden in a box at the back of a neighbor's barn during a community work day, and I had read every single one of them in secret over the course of 2 years. History, science, stories about people whose lives looked nothing like mine, ideas that stretched my mind in directions I did not even have words for yet. And every single time I closed one of those books and walked back into my daily life, I felt the gap between who I was on the outside and who I was becoming on the inside growing a little wider. I want you to understand that I did not feel angry at my community. I did not feel like I was being held prisoner or that the people around me were cruel. They were not. They were good people living by a set of values they believed in deeply, and I respected that, I truly did. But I was becoming someone who had questions that had no safe place to live, inside the life I was expected to live. And I was terrified. I was terrified that if I ever let anyone see that side of me, they would not just be disappointed, they would feel betrayed, because I had let them build an image of me that was not the whole truth, and I had let them build it for years. So I kept going. I helped my mother with the younger children without being asked. I sat in every church service with my hands folded and my eyes forward. I said the right things in conversations and asked after people's families and brought food when someone was sick. I became so good at performing the life I was supposed to live that there were entire days where I could almost forget that the other version of me existed. Almost. But then something would happen. A question would surface. A memory of something I had read would come back to me, and the longing would return so sharply that I would have to excuse myself and go somewhere quiet just to breathe through it. The moment things started to shift came when I was 19. A woman named Ruth joined our community after marrying a man from our district. Ruth was originally from another state, and she carried herself a little differently than anyone I had grown up around. She was warm and faithful, but she also had a way of asking questions during conversation that felt less like small talk and more like she was genuinely trying to understand you. One afternoon, we were shelling peas together on her porch, and she asked me something that nobody had ever asked me before. She said, "Hannah, what do you love? Not what do you do, not what are you good at. What do you actually love?" And I sat there with my hands still in the bowl, and for a moment, I could not speak. Because the honest answer was right there at the surface, closer than it had ever been, and I had absolutely no idea what would happen if I let it out. I told her I loved my family. I told her I loved our community. And those things were true, they were genuinely true, but Ruth looked at me for a moment with this quiet kind of knowing in her eyes, and she said, "I believe you. But I think there might be more you love than you are saying." She did not push me, she just left that door open, and it was the first time in my life that someone had left a door open for me without requiring me to walk through it immediately. I thought about that conversation for weeks. I could not let it go. What finally broke something open in me was an evening in late autumn when my youngest brother came to me with a question about something he had read in a school book, a simple question about how the world worked, and I answered him so quickly, so eagerly, with so much detail that he looked at me with wide eyes and asked how I knew all of that. And I felt the blood rise to my face, and I told him I had just heard it somewhere, but lying to my little brother in that small, quiet moment was the thing that broke me, because it was one thing to carry a secret to protect myself. It was another thing entirely when the secret started requiring me to be dishonest with the people I loved most. I went to Ruth the following week. I sat across from her at her kitchen table with my hands in my lap, and I told her everything. I told her about the books, about the questions, about the years of feeling like I was living as two separate people, about the fear that never fully went away, about the longing that never stopped returning no matter how hard I worked to quiet it. And I cried in a way I had not let myself cry in years. Not the quiet, controlled kind of crying that was acceptable, but the deep, exhausted kind that comes from carrying something too long without rest. Ruth did not tell me I was wrong. She also did not tell me everything was going to be simple. She said that loving something the community did not have room for did not make me a bad person. She said that honesty was not the same as rebellion. And she told me that the people who truly loved me deserved the chance to know the real me, even if that truth required a harder conversation than I had ever been willing to have. Telling my mother was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I sat with her one evening after the younger children were in bed, and I told her what I had been hiding. I told her about the books. I told her about the longing. I told her that I loved her and our family and our community, and I also told her that there was a part of me that she had never been allowed to meet. My mother was quiet for a very long time. She did not cry immediately, and she did not speak immediately, and the silence between us was the longest silence I have ever sat inside. When she finally spoke, she said, "I always knew something was heavy on you. I just never knew how to reach it." And then she cried, and I cried, and neither of us had easy answers. But for the first time in years, the weight I had been carrying was shared between two people instead of only mine. Things did not become perfect after that. Some people in the community needed time to understand. Some conversations were hard. Some relationships shifted in ways I had not prepared myself for. But what I found on the other side of honesty was something I had never experienced before. I found people who loved me for what was actually true about me, not just for the image I had worked so hard to maintain. And that kind of love, the kind that knows the real you and chooses to stay, is something no amount of perfect behavior can ever earn. I learned that the pressure to be perfect is one of the loneliest pressures a person can live under. Because when everyone believes you have it all together, nobody thinks to ask if you are okay. And the longer you let them believe the image, the harder it becomes to let anyone see past it. I also learned that hiding a part of yourself to protect the people you love is not always love. Sometimes it is fear wearing love's clothing, and fear kept me small for a very long time. Have you ever hidden a part of yourself because you were afraid people would see you differently? Let me know in the comments, because I know I am not the only one who has ever carried something alone for too long. And if this story reached something inside of you, if it reminded you that honesty takes more courage than perfection ever will, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. The heaviest secrets are not always the ones that make us weak. Sometimes they are the ones we carry because we are desperate not to lose the love we have worked so hard to deserve.